I don't know, email would work also. Probably the easiest thing to do would be to call us. Do you have a card? Do you have our card? Who are we speaking with?
I think I do.
Also, you guys, you can go to the website and just search members. So you see that my class up there, and Gail's class, you can find their contact information.
Oh, that's good, Grace. Thank you.
So I'm sharing a screen right now, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm getting started. I kind of like put you guys little. All right. So now I've got. All right. So you can tell by this, I was younger when I first presented this. First 2 times was in 2016. I've aged a lot. So that's 4 years ago. Gee whiz. Gravity. Let me just tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm into this kind of stuff. I have a business degree in marketing from my youthful days. I do not have a degree in poli-sci, which means I'm not an attorney, but I'm an avid learner about communication and the power of persuasion. I like learning from Socrates' teachings. I believe in that there are 4 learning behaviors, and I'm going to introduce that tonight. I believe in NLP, that's neuro-linguistic programming, and believe there are a lot of skills that should be taught in public school that are not taught. And we all, from time to time mention that amongst ourselves. But when was the last time you said to yourself, I wish I'd taken debate? Yeah, I always thought the guys on the debate team were nerds. Now I wish I was on the debate team back in high school. I could really use those skills right now. And maybe you've never thought of that, and maybe you were on debate team and that's why you're so awesome. But I learned from others that were in debate teams and stuff like that, words like gambits, and they learn to negotiate. They learn about logos, ethos, and pathos, which is Aristotle. Stuff I would have learned if I was on a debate team. So anyway, since then, I got very curious with this and studied it for a couple of years under a doctor of philosophy and negotiation out of Washington University. First of all, where do we negotiate? As a kid, the first time I remember an actual negotiation, I was a young teenager. I think we call that tweenager now. My family and I crossed the border into Mexico. And my dad, who was a business professor, taught me how to negotiate, or he called it haggling. So he taught me how to haggle for a lower price, never pay the price. And I was like blown away by that. I had no idea you could haggle. After that experience, he taught me more about negotiation all the time. And I have had successful negotiations from buying my first sewing machine to my first car and that kind of thing. I bet you have plenty of examples of negotiation, and if you have a teenager, you're probably tired of those negotiation skills from the teenager. With whom do we negotiate? We negotiate with strangers, people we don't know at all, with coworkers, employees, with our family, obviously, and friends. But negotiating is something we do all the time, and with each person we need to negotiate differently. I'm going to mention this right here. This is called the primacy and regency effect. And the primacy and regency effect states that people remember best what happens first, not so much what happens in the middle of the conversation, and second best is what happened last. So I will have put my slides together so that the most important stuff is in the middle, so you won't remember it, and you'll have to go back. That's a joke, okay? All right, first of all, we're going to talk about the awareness key. Oh, and by the way, there's going to be 5 keys. So each time you see a key, this is like, maybe if you're making notes, you might want to write this down, the awareness key. This is the first key. The key of awareness is to look for successful negotiations, is to look for cues and listen for cues. When we are aware, we can use the momentum of what is around us to further negotiate our cause. You want to be aware of the other party's current state. You want to be aware of what's going on in your prospect's mind. In this case, I'm going to curtail this as the prospect is a seller of their house, a seller of their duplex, or whatever you might want to buy. But we're going to talk about the prospect as the seller. Awareness means knowing and understanding what is going on with the other person's mind. Awareness means bringing to the front of your mind what the other person is considering and not saying. Awareness is keying in on the stage of the relationship which you are in with the other before you even try to negotiate. How do we do this? Well, like I said, we listen for clues and we look for clues. And what I want you to consider is the prospect having 3 successive doors that are closed tight and is not letting you in. Your goal is to get to an agreeable situation, and you can't do that unless you go through these doors. The first door is, I don't know you. So you think that you need to talk about yourself, right? And let the other person know you. Well, wrong. Actually, that's the wrong thing to do. Selling yourself to the other person is usually just going to make them want to keep that door locked. So how are you going to get all the way to the trust door, the second door? The first thing you need to do is show respect to the other person, show interest in the other person and their situation. So in my opinion, the best thing to do is ask questions that gets the other person to talk about themselves. Even the most shyest person will talk about themselves. So by showing respect and asking questions, you can start to get them to open up. So the next circle is to go to share. So we're going to go from show respect to share, and then finally get to trust. And then hopefully they like you. Show that you respect not just the other person, but show that you respect people around you, whether it's your partner. Show that you respect your world. You're a person that you're a person, not a negotiator at this point. Okay, just relax. Find something in common. Get to know the person. Ask questions, and find something you have in common, and then you can share an experience together. By listening, then cue in on what the other person is saying. And trust starts to seed then. It may not be much trust at first, but you can show you trust him or her, and he or she should start to trust you back. What can you say at this point to show that you trust this person? Ask for their opinion on something and thank them for that opinion. Thank them for something. Look for something about them to give a compliment, but not, a frivolous compliment. And it takes awareness to earn the time that it takes to create trust. It takes trust to create likability. It takes all of this to get the door open to what you need next. So it takes time, respect, trust, and likability to get that person to let you in. All right, let's just kind of take a look at this slide here. Who is the most important? So we've been talking about the seller this whole time. Would it be you or the seller in your mind? And you might be thinking your agenda is very important, but you want to focus on the seller. What do you want to talk about? You or the seller? You want to talk about the seller. whose needs do you want to talk about? You want to talk about the seller's needs. So you got to ask questions. And it's kind of odd to be doing it like this because I know everybody's muted and I like to ask questions. But oh well, maybe I'll be able to figure this out. How do you get the seller to talk to you? One of the ways is, besides what we just gone through, is take on an agreeable disposition. Say yes a lot. Agree. Your mannerisms, your vernacular, you know, find common ground. And I'll go more into this. And then the next thing I want to talk about is ask more questions to take the road that they talk about. So if a seller calls you and you hear a dog barking in the background, you might want to talk about the dog first before you get to the seller. This is just like talk about something. So ask about the dog, kind of dog, blah, blah, blah. If you can't see, so you can ask. Or if they're, you know, got children or whatever, you know, if they're busy because they're taking food to their mom, ask about that kind of thing. And then agree, you know, something agreeable. It's like, I love dogs, or I love kids. I have this dog, or I used to have this dog, or whatever. So what this is called is destination negotiations, what we're going to talk about next. So you've probably heard about win-win negotiations, right? Well, I'm going to introduce you to something different. It's called destination negotiation, which is the type of negotiation style that I practice. If you Google the term, you won't find anything on it, but it's my way of getting to yes. So the idea of destination focused negotiations is that you focus on the conversation on where the seller is going to be when the transaction is all done. It's not about win-win. Well, X out win-win, which you've heard so much about, because win-win puts you into the negotiation too. But all we're going to do is get to this, what the seller wants. What the seller wants when you buy the property. So you want to focus on how the seller wants to see themselves after you buy the property. Making a destination offer is just that, understanding the desired destination of the seller and presenting an offer that declares arrival to that destination. And I'll go into that here. Here's some examples of the destination negotiations. The obvious key is to making a destination offer is to have a firm understanding of who the seller is, what they think, what their emotions are around the situation, where they want to land when it's closed. For every observable reality, a destination solution cures current reality. For, let's look at like a couple of them here, possible non-owner-occupied scenarios. So it's like a rental unit or whatever. The current reality is the seller doesn't like dealing with vacancies. That is what the current seller's reality is. You find that out. So in order to travel to a place of relief of worry and dealing with vacancies and dealing with tenants, you want to talk about this kind of picture where you offer relief of worry permanently. Or the seller has been taken to the cleaners by a bad tenant. Offer relief of worry. And you know, you want to show empathy as well and how you'll take on that problem. The property is unkept and it's stressful. Offer, okay, now in this case, I'm like looking at an option to purchase plan. So offer a spruce up plan to be accomplished in so many days after your closing or signing of the option. And I have to say, I don't have the chat board available to see right now, so if there's anything going on, right? I won't see it, so you can just interrupt me if you need to. Okay, and here's possible situations or scenarios of owner-occupied. This is somebody approaching retirement and their income for retirement is not enough. And you could then strategically lay out benefits of income stream from a high interest rate in your seller financing program. Or the seller is overwhelmed by the condition of property and the sales process. Offer to buy as is, assuring that they can walk away. Worried about dying and leaving a mess. You could offer that your purchase will have the, if you're paying on over time, that through seller financing, that the remaining payments after their death would go to their beneficiaries, and they will be taken care of. Or they can't afford the house, they have bad credit. Oh, so I left this one blank on purpose so that you could like think of your own. And I wish I could see the tab. But what could it be? If it's a, what could the destination be for this person? They can't afford the house, they live in it, and their credit is bad.
One of the things is if they're in foreclosure or pre-foreclosure, and that's one of the things that can happen when they can't afford the house. You can buy the house once again as is, so they're not putting any extra money into it, and that can relieve that burden of debt for them so that they can move on to a different place, whether it be renting a smaller house that they can afford better, whatever that may be.
Yeah. And what I do here is talk about the apartment that they might be getting, or what do you want to get into, an apartment? Do you want to rent a house? What part of town? And then get them talking about that, is like, because you will see when they're talking about a brighter future, you know, being relieved, their eyes light up and they love to talk about it, and they'll tell you, well, I've been looking at apartment complex at such and such, and I've got an I'm about to put my application in or whatever. So yeah. And so buying it so they don't have to pick up the mess, clean up the mess, giving them time to move, giving them time to get to their rental, and possibly, which is what I've done, is paying some money up front so they have a down payment for that apartment, or the, you know what I mean.
So you make an additional deposit besides the earnest money to them for for part of the purchase price of the house?
Brad, what I do is I actually write up a receipt that I've given them money, and that is the earnest money. Basically, it's not earnest money, it's just a down on the.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, and then I turn all that into escrow.
The contract I have, I've never used that line for the purchase price, but it's an additional deposit, blah, 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 upon signing the agreement. So
Yeah.
I hadn't thought about, that's a good way to go.
And in fact, the one that I did in, and I talked about the last meeting that we had live, was the one in that you saw in
Marcola.
Marcola, right? And I paid $5,000 on such and such date so that they could take that to their apartment and put it down, and have their moving expenses paid. And then came the issue for me, which was the flood zone, and
Right.
that lowered the ARV by $30,000. So she didn't bat an eye at lowering the price $30,000 because she was on her destination. She was on her way.
Right.
Yeah, there was like no turning back. The bags were packed.
You'd started the train down those tracks and she's on it.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice.
And I was really, it was my first time I've ever had to go back and ask for a lower price. So yeah, so I was really surprised how that worked out, actually. And then another situation was where the seller had needed to move out of town, and wanted to live with someone else, and I did the same sort of offer that we just talked about with that one. And yeah, they're happy, and it's not, and you know, I could say win-win, but I picture everything as a destination for them. Yeah, I'm going to take over the burden, and they're going to be on their way. All right, now we're going to look at means of agreement. This is another key. Means of agreement is another tool getting through that door, and this is to practice Aristotle's means of agreement, or means of persuasion. So to do this, you need to arm yourself with some negotiating tools, sort of, but actually it's really paying attention to moving through these different parts of each human. These are found, these per Aristotle, the ethos and the logos and the pathos are three appeals or means of persuasion, and they are found in the very core of each person's personality. So ethos, so I picture myself in this, you know, with the seller, and I'm looking for these three parts, you know, ethos, logos, and pathos. So, and I need to persuade touching every one of those parts. And I'm going to explain ethos here. Ethos is the ethical appeal. It's the means to convince an audience of your credibility or their credibility. So what you want to do is look at how does the person view himself. What position in society does this person identify herself in? You talk to that person in that realm. Does that person want you to see him as strong? Does that person want you to see her as smart? Whatever it is, respond to that person in their desire for that status. This is also, ethos is also referenced as the ego of the seller. So you want to appeal to the credibility. You can tap into the seller's moral standards and persuade that. And logos is the logical part of the mind, which means to convince your audience, or I should change that to seller, by use of logic or reason. These are some questions you can ask logically. I'm not sure what that noise is. Okay. Speaking logically to the seller would be like, how much do they owe on the house? How much are their payments? How many payments behind? Are their taxes paid up? You know, just that kind of stuff, all right?
Why don't you mute everybody?
I'm going to just on that button. Okay, that's better, right? Oh, you can tell me now.
Much better.
Okay. And pathos. You can see, I just like saw this to demonstrate pathos. Happiness in a box. Pathos is the emotional appeal, and you see this a lot in advertising. It's a means to persuade the audience by appealing to their emotions. And in this case, like it's talking to a seller, the emotion might be fear. So you might be addressing their fear either of what the future is going to bring, and then talk about how great it's going to be when they get on to that new destination. One of the, well, I'm going to go a little bit aside here. One of the things you don't want to do when you're in this pathos appeal is to talk about the closing date and when they get their money, because they will hook onto that so fast if you're into the pathos emotional appeal at that time. And it might take a couple of days to get the money after the close due to holiday or weekend, and you know what time it recorded at the courthouse. So I'm going to go over the whole list now. Logos is your content. It could be discussing arguments, the facts, the benefits, the dollar figures, you know, the data, just showing that you're interested in helping them on that kind of stuff. Ethos, which again is the ego side. You know, we might show client testimonials, success stories, track record, and titles, that kind of stuff. And delivery, oops, I'm going to go into number 3, pathos, which is talking in stories. Positive and negative emotions like frustration, anger, and love, or respect are all parts of pathos. And then going back to ethos, when you talk, you want to have good eye contact, body language, and vocal variety and poise. And I'm going to go into this delivery part here in a minute. Also, in the delivery of pathos, you want to have coherence, body language, and voice, and coherent with the specific content. All right, back when I did this live, I had people separate into groups and practice logos, ethos, and pathos questions and that kind of stuff. But let's see, what time is it? Yeah, we won't go into that because it'd be too confusing. But anyway, we're going to go in behind the curtain now for some more communication clues. Communication cues or clues tap into the nonverbal clues. And I'm sure you've all heard of this kind of stuff as a good refresher. You want to listen to their rate of speech. If you're in person, you want to notice the body language. You want to notice the posture, the pitch of their voice, and the tone of their voice. And this little questionnaire is about when you're talking on the phone, I'm sending approximately how many communication clues to my listener. If A is 2 to 3, body language is 4 to 9, posture this. So you'd be looking at A, 2 to 3, plus pitch and tone here. And possibly your body language might be changing your voice as well. But so you're sending a lot of clues on the phone. When you're speaking face to face, you're sending all the clues there, you know, 30 clues. Or, sorry. Keying into it's supposed to be nonverbal cues. I've got a slide out of order. Okay, something's missing in my slide deck. So I'm going to go over this here. The rate of speech, when you're noticing the rate of speech, the body language, the posture, the pitch, and the tone of the other person, the best thing you can do is to match that. If they're talking fast, you talk fast. If they're talking slow, you talk slow. If their body language is head down, then your body language is going to have your head down. If you're, you know, if their body language has their arms crossed, then you're going to match the body language of arms crossed as well. And then as you are moving through your time of talking with them, you can test to see if they're starting to be agreeable with you by changing your body language before they change theirs and see if they follow you. Because this is a really awesome thing that you can start to lead the other person into a new posture, a new, all of these different communication cues there. Do you guys have any questions on that? All right. And I'll go on to the next key, which is the verbal cues. Verbal cues is to be listening for the words they say. Do this, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, you might not have seen this before, which is the speaker's main method of learning. You can find out by the words they use. And how they learn is going to be how they listen to you as well. If they're a visual learner, they're going to, I can't do a circle there. You want to speak in visual language. If they're an audio learner, then you want to speak in audio language. If they're a kinesthetic learner, then you want to use kinesthetic language. And if they're a digital learner, nothing will make them more relaxed than to talk in digital language. And I have quite a few years in sales, and one of the best jobs I had selling was selling to computer programmers, computer people. I was selling training, computer training back in the 90s. And I learned about digital words there. And I learned that when I noticed that they were a digital thinker, that if I used digital words, that I'd have the training sold really fast. So that's just an example. Digital words, I'm going to start even from the end here, is using words like think, when I decide. Oh, another thing that a digital person will say, and there's lots more digital people today than there used to be. In fact, when these first came out, there was only these 3 types of learning prior to the computer age that we've gone into. Now there's a lot of digital learners. I have found that they say something like, well, when one decides to do this, what happens next? All right. They don't say when I decide or if I decide to do this, what will happen next? So they use the word one instead of a pronoun. Advise, understand, plan, know. These are words that they will use verbs. They're verbs here. Okay, and now I'm going to go back to visual. Visual people, visual learners use words like I see, I can picture that. Just all sorts of words that have to do with visual. Appear, outlook, imagine, focus, perception, looks, clear as a bell. Oh, wait, clear as a bell. Could be an audio, or is actually an audio phrase. Clear view, okay, observe. Auditory words, or if they're an auditory learner, they use words like sounds good. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Their verbs are much more audio words. Mention, inquire, scream, tune, shrill, listen, ring, resonate, tell. And kinesthetic words, and people that are, and kinesthetic means they learn from doing and feeling, feeling, yeah. So they'll use words like feel, grasp, firm, pressure, grip, moves. These are just examples of myriads of words. Flow, warm, numb, dull, support. They might, some simple phrases of visuals are catch a glimpse of, in view of, and auditory, that's clear as a bell to me. To tell the truth, you know, just the verbs is where it's at. Or in this case, in kinesthetic, it is adverbs and adjectives. It's warm and fuzzy. I get a warm and fuzzy feeling talking to you. Or I'll pull some strings and see what can happen. And in digital, again, I need to know, or one needs to know, I should change that. These facts indicate. Anyways, it's just interesting, and if you can talk in the same words that they're talking at the same rate they're talking, then they will think you really get them. You really get them. And now, as I said, that was the recency effect, and see if you remember that, and the primacy effect. People remember best what happens first, second best what happens last, and least what happens in the middle. Now, good for discussion, if any? Hi. I pulled your faces back up.
Grace, I loved it. That is really good stuff, and I've heard this before. When at some point down the road, when we get when I would call reopened, or things kind of somewhat go back to normal, and we have a lot more people, would you be willing to do this again at some point in the future? I think there's some really good stuff.
Yeah, my original class has me giving you guys things to do. So it's much more kinesthetic learning. So
Right.
yeah.
And lastly, I just gotta say, I'm hoping that Brad's internet connection went dead and he's not actually sleeping.
We're talking Brad Anderson, not Brad Larson.
Brad Anderson, not Brad Larson.
I think if I unmuted it, we'd hear snoring.
Oh shoot, that's funny.
So
Great.
Grace, one of our trainers at Berkshire Hathaway, or our main trainer at Berkshire Hathaway, always talks about knowing the why. And I think that goes along really well with what you were saying at the beginning, is that when you're negotiating with somebody, it isn't about selling yourself, it's about knowing where they want to go. So if you're buying somebody's property, when they're selling the property, it becomes less of what price that they're trying to stick to, and more to what they need to get to where they're going. So as an example, if someone's retiring and they want to move out to the coast and live out on the coast in a small little cottage, and they have a $500,000 house here in Salem, because that's where I am, it's knowing that that's where they want to go in selling that house. And if you can provide the path for that in language, they are more they're more likely to deal with you and get what you need out of the deal, because they're getting what they need, where they want to go.
That's exactly right. Right. You want to make that path to their future as smooth as possible. Stacy, I haven't heard much from you. Did I forget you in the introductions?
No, we talked. We're good.
All right. And Joseph, hello. We didn't hear from you earlier.
I think you got to unmute him.
Oh yeah, I'm the one that muted him. There you are. Whether or not he wants to be unmuted, I don't know. Well, on one of our first Zoom meetings, it was the Bend meeting and it was the last Bend meeting went really, really well. It was an awesome meeting. Daryl had a couple of guys from a company that is an outsourcing of workers, and it was really good. And then the first meeting, however, was the Bend meeting. Daryl went into the bathroom and washed his face while he was talking, and the phone was showing. Scott, who is this? Odor Hero guy, who is this? Is this your wife?
This is, I'm sorry, this is my wife. This is Deborah. Deborah, this is everybody at the Eugene REIA. Of course, you would recognize Mr. Brad Larson from First Baptist down there, and then Stacy DeHart from Greeters, yeah. And then there's Jeanette Montague from Greeters as well. But anyway, I just said, hey, you just have to come in and put your smiling face on here and say hi to everybody. So.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. So nice to meet you. and well, never mind. I won't say anything about Brad.
Yes, exactly. No.
Yeah, any other thoughts about tonight's presentation that I can take to fix it up better?
This last slide is just, there's so much in that, picking up on visual words, auditory, kinesthetic, digital. That, I mean, that could just be a whole thing in itself right there. That is a,
It can be a whole class, and you can, and I have tests so you can test yourself and that kind of stuff to see what you are, and you compare it with your partner, your spouse, and see what they are, and all that kind of stuff. And it's really something.
yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, there is a lot of information in that. The first screen or the second screen that you had, Grace, I was like, yeah, I've seen this before, and kind of a refresher. But as you went along, I was like, oh, okay, wow, there's a lot of information to retain here, and it's very important stuff.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Grace, they teach that same class at the University of Farmers.
Oh, really? Something similar?
Yes.
I wrote this class. So. Interesting. Yeah, well, I appreciate it, everyone. So remember, oh, I'm going to stop the recording.